The Elements of Friendship, Book 1, Hurry, by Armas Figeland. Chapter 2, The Everfree Forest. Seize her! Cried the mayor of Ponyville, and the stunned royal guard snapped to attention. Twilight blinked. She almost forgotten they were there. Only she knows where the Queen Celestia is! Even as the Pegasi among the royal guards rose up and prepared to dive upon Nightmare Moon, Twilight had a sneaking suspicion that they would not be successful in their attempt to subdue the former Mare in the Moon. So she scooped up Spike and her Dwemer Shimmer and made for the exit as quickly as she could. Which was taking quite a bit longer than she hoped, considering that every pony else was rooted to their respective spots. Behind her, she could hear Nightmare Moon cry out to the royal guards, "Be gone, you fools!" And a deep crack of thunder, followed by fresh shrieks of horror, told her all she needed to know about their fate. Meanwhile, Rainbow Dash was still struggling to get free from underneath Applejack's tackle. The Earth Pony was not only larger than she was, but Earth Pony muscles were much denser than the other two pony races, giving them greater strength and resilience, and greater body mass to boot. Add on to that the fact that Pegasi had many hollow bones in her body to reduce body weight for the ease of flight, and Rainbow Dash was in a really tough spot. But she did manage to wriggle out from her day-to-day competitor and beeline straight for Nightmare Moon. Nightmare Moon cackled madly. Ha 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 ha! Her mane and tail of starry blue mist, now a twister that encircled her completely, and sent every Pegasus slamming against the walls of the gazebo atrium. The mad mare of darkness then tore off toward the sky through the holes he had just ripped in the roof. Wait, you! Rainbow Dash bellowed, recovering quickly and shooting after the dark Alicorn. Though Rainbow Dash prided herself on being the fastest Pegasus in Saddle Valley, in the air, on the ground, Applejack the Earth Pony would probably give her a run for her bits. Nightmare Moon was proving to be a diligent pursuee. Still, she was closing in. Rainbow Dash just needed to flap a little harder, and she'd be on the usurper. All of a sudden, Nightmare Moon was knocked off course by a golden fireball. Rainbow Dash skidded to a halt in midair, eyes gaping at the near miss. A pair of azure-uniformed Pegasi bolting by, not even by 1,008 hooves above Rainbow's head, snapped her back to her senses, rubbing her eyes fiercely. She turned to look at the trajectory of the two Pegasi. They themselves seemed to be in hot pursuit of Nightmare Moon. Nightmare Moon was presently in hot combat, firing blinding cyan Dwemer beams, arcing across with violet lightning from her Alicorn, with three Pegasi in azure flight uniforms emblazoned with golden lightning patterns. Rainbow Dash gagged. The Wonderbolts! There was Captain Spitfire, leader of the Wonderbolts, crackling with a golden aurora of fire that Rainbow felt the heat even at her distance, her orange mane flaring like an inferno all its own, and Soren, whose aura of shimmering wind deflected Nightmare Moon's Dwemer beams into the empty sky, and Fleetfoot, whose speed burst allowed her to deftly dodge the Nightmare's attacks and waste the enemy's energy. Oh my gosh, 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 oh my gosh! Rainbow Dash thought excitedly, her mind abuzz with all sorts of wild fantasies of darting in there and delivering a decisive kick to Nightmare Moon's gut, ending the battle, coaxing the tearful admission by Nightmare Moon of where she had present Queen Celestia, and being awarded the position of honorary captain of the Wonderbolts for her actions in the line of duty. But a Dwemer beam that whizzed by her left ear, sensing a part of her mane, snapped Rainbow Dash out of fangirl mode, which she snapped right back into when Spitfire, who spotted Rainbow Dash hovering stupidly under a big battle, glowered at the Rainbow Pegasus and barked, "Clear sky, rookie!" "A Wonderbolt just talk to me!" Rainbow Dash squeaked inside. But this turned out to be just the distraction Nightmare Moon needed. With their primary offensive compromised, she came off the defensive and sent her starry blue mane exploding outwards, sending the Wonderbolts tumbling. They recovered swiftly, as per their training, but the damage was done. Nightmare Moon was tearing off into the night, off to who knew where. Spitfire cursed under her breath. She had hoped to buy a bit more time by engaging Nightmare Moon in battle, but this? Rainbow Dash smiled nervously as the three high-ranking Wonderbolts hovered down to her level, glowering at her with looks that could have killed if they knew the spells for that. She scratched the back of her head with her right forehoof, chuckling casually. I'm a big fan. A hoof struck Rainbow Dash in the face. Spitfire was blasting fire out of her nostrils in fury. What was going through your mind to be flying into a combat zone, civilian? Spitfire shouted, with all the force of a drill sergeant in the military days of old. Rainbow Dash hesitated, her ears drooping slightly. I was chasing Nightmare Moon. Obviously, Fleetfoot said shortly, her cerise eyes narrowed in severe distaste. But you have no military training. Your mind clearly wasn't on your objective. Well, you guys are just so awesome! Rainbow Dash said defensively, reaching out her forehose in plea. We could have kept her pinned down until our reinforcements arrived, said Sword coldly, his forelegs folded. If you hadn't been in the line of fire! Rainbow Dash withdrew her hose in shame. She seriously messed up. She always dreamed of impressing the Wonderbolts with some of her sweetest moves, like the super speed strut, the fantastic Philly Flash, and the Buccaneer Blaze. But now, they wanted nothing to do with her, all because she'd gotten too close to one of their military operations. But they were just an aerial flight team. How had they held their own against some pony who was surely at a power level matched only by Queen Celestia herself? I didn't know you guys were military guys, she offered weakly. Spitfire bowed her head slightly, glaring at Rainbow from under her brow. The Wonderbolts have a strong military history, you know, she hissed. We're not just pretty show ponies who fart lightning storms. Maybe if you opened up a book, you'd know that! And with that, the Wonderbolts bolted off, leaving Rainbow alone with her thoughts. Well, Celestia, there goes my chances of becoming a Wonderbolt, she thought miserably, looking down at the gazebo. A lavender unicorn had just emerged and was beating a direct path toward the Golden Oak Library. Rainbow eye cocked itself upward. Where's she off to? Twilight found a basket in the closet of the ground floor of the Golden Oak Library, ripped the tablecloth from under the leftover food from Pinky's surprise party the previous night, and tucked a tuckered spike into the basket with the tablecloth as a makeshift blanket. She smiled warmly down by the baby drake in spite of herself. Despite her clinical stance regarding her part in his birth, Twilight still cared deeply for Spike. How so? She did not know. But for some reason that drove Twilight to distraction. She could not allow herself to care for him as her son. Although she was only smiling on Spike for a moment, Twilight shook her head vigorously to get her thoughts in order. She was just doing this because Spike needed his sleep. He was a baby dragon, after all, and he had already been up almost a whole 24 hours. Nodding, Twilight turned to face the bookshelves along the circular walls of the Golden Oak Library, and found herself completely lost. The library was definitely a lot more spacious looking, now that scores of ponies were not crowding it trying to be her friends. However, some part of Twilight that Twilight herself could not understand found the library to be woefully empty now. Brushing this errant thought aside, Twilight tried to apply herself to the task of finding some information on Nightmare Moon and or the elements of harmony, but she had no idea where to even begin her search. She had no idea what sort of system of organization this library used. In a rude town like this, who knew how they set up their books? Twilight cursed herself, muttering to herself, as improbable and ridiculous as the very concept is it too much to ask for a reference guide to the elements of harmony? And just what the hey are the elements of harmony? Snapped a hostile and very scratchy voice that Twilight immediately recognized. As soon as she started turning toward the voice, she found herself nose to nose with a very irate, rainbow-maned Pegasus. She had a hoof-shaped bruise under her left eye. Twilight had left the door open, apparently. And how did you know about Nightmare Moon, huh? Rainbow Dash continued, glaring deeply into Twilight's eyes, her wings flapping irritably at her sides. Where are ya? Some sort of spy? To Twilight's relief, Rainbow Dash abruptly pulled back. But that was a short-lived reprieve, for Rainbow Dash had been pulled back by the tail by Applejack, who had strided into the library while Rainbow Dash was grilling Twilight. And Twilight screamed eternally, The three other crazy ponies she and Spike had met yesterday were following Applejack. "Simmer there down there, Sally," Applejack said coolly. "I'll work at Twilight here, ain't no spy." She gave Twilight a direct gaze. Twilight couldn't look her in the eye. "But you sure know an awful lot about these going-ons, don't you, Twilight?" Faced with 5 ponies standing between her and the library exit, and no real chance to leak out without some pony tackling her, if she could even concentrate with the world being turned upside down as it was, Twilight heaved a sigh and confessed. "I read all about the prophecy foretelling Nightmare Moon's return. It said that she would return on the longest day of the mega-aggressive year of her banishment, and that unless she was defeated once and for all with the elements of harmony, that she would bring about—" Twilight's heart stopped. "Nighttime eternal." Her pupils contracted. "Oh no!" She turned and bolted up the stairs without another word. Perplexed and a little frightened by Twilight's sudden actions, the 5 other ponies followed her slowly up. "No!" Twilight cried, throwing herself at the base of a pair of potted plants by the east-facing window past the bed. One was an agave, and the other a cactus. Her ears were flat against her head. The barrel of her chest was heaving. "No! This can't be happening! You'll die without sunlight!" Fluttershy put her mouth in sympathy, but the other 4 seemed befuddled by this a seeming overreaction. "They're just plants, T.S.," Rainbow Dash said, an eyebrow cocked. "Just plants!" Twilight mumbled, trying to face them. She was actually crying. Her eyes were bloodshot. "They're my parents!" This seemed only to confuse them more, and Twilight had to collect her thoughts and compose herself so she could explain. It was very difficult. Every moment lost was another moment of everlasting night, and another moment of her parents' lives squandered. Eventually, though, she calmed herself enough to where she thought she could do more than blubber incoherently. "At my entrance exam for Queen Celestia School for Gifted Unicorns," she gestured toward the agave and cactus, "I accidentally turned Mom and Dad into these." Rarity gasped sharply, a hoof flying to her mouth. She was not alone. Applejack gave a shuddering, hiccuping gasp herself, bringing a hoof to lower her Stetson over her eyes. Pinkie gave a look of surprisingly sincere sympathy. Twilight had collapsed into a sobbing heap, burying her face into her hose. Her tail twisted back and forth agitedly. "And now, after all this time trying to find a way to chase them back, I'm going to lose them! What'll I do? What'll I do?" A hoof slipped down over Twilight's hooves, lifting her face up to make eye contact. It was Applejack, who was smiling sadly. "You'll have my sympathy, Sugar Cube," she said levelly, despite the tears streaming down her freckled cheeks. "I lost my Ma and Pa just after Apple Bloom was born, but you still kind of have yours. Ma and Pa are grazing up in the Elysian fields for the rest of eternity. You can still bring yours back. You just gotta buck up and get to it." Twilight rubbed her eyes with her long fetlocks, wiping away the last of her tears. Of all the crazy ponies she met in Ponyville, Applejack seemed the most level-headed, if a little too intensely familiar with her extended family. The aching in her heart started to ebb, but she put away the warmness that was flooding in place. "You're right, Applejack," said Twilight as she got back onto her hooves, fighting the smile in her heart. "I can't be blubbering here when there's work to be done. Queen Celestia might be missing. My guess is Nightmare Moon imprisoned her in the sun as a form of revenge, but that doesn't mean I still can't do something as her protege." "What can you do?" asked Rarity. "Oh!" squealed Pinkie, talking wildly in the room. "Is there another guessing game? I love guessing games. I love all kinds of games." "Can't, Pinkie!" shouted Rainbow. After a moment's tense silence, Twilight answered Rarity's question. "Well, not much," she said awfully. "I mean, I could create a temporary miniature sun that arcs over Ponyville for the day period that we expect, but that would have to be renewed every week or so." To Twilight's surprise, the 5 ponies' jaw dropped. You can do that?" Rainbow gaped. "That's amazing! You're like some kind of magical prodigy!" "It's prodigy," Twilight corrected. "And no, I'm not. I'm not anything special. Her ears flattened against her head as she glanced sadly back at her parents. Or I would have figured out how to fix my greatest mistake. She shook her head violently, as if trying to shake those nasty sad thoughts out of her ears. I always knew I had a time limit, how long I could stretch out the lives of those two plants. But now, with the sun on the other side of Harmonia, potentially forever, time was even more of an issue. I could cast a heliogenesis spell, but I can't guarantee it will last very long, not with Nightmare Moon's fury against the light of the day. Then, she took her hose into the polished wooden floor, grinning. We find the elements of harmony. Yeah, sounds great and all, Rainbow said with a cocked eyebrow, forelegs folded over the barrel of her chest. But you didn't answer my question. What are the elements of harmony? The elements of harmony, explained Twilight, are the force of magic that Queen Celestia used to banish Nightmare Moon to the moon a mega grossum ago. There are supposedly 6 elements together, but I have no idea what they are, how they work, or even what they do. Fluttershy began quietly. You do know where they are, right? I'm afraid I don't know where they are, Twilight answered, but I have a very good idea. I'll explain after the heliogenesis spell. Twilight stood a good 3 paces away from the entrance to the tree library, the other 5 ponies standing, or, in the case of Rainbow Dash, hovering, at least 5 paces away from her. In the distance, they could hear the screams of terror of many ponies who were spooked by the everlasting night, and the cries of foals who were confused as to the fact the sun was still asleep. So, what's this fancy sun summoner spell of yours like, Twilight? Asked Applejack. Twilight turned to face the Earth Pony. Well, it's nowhere near as powerful as Queen Celestia's direct control over the sun itself, but it's no cantrip in and of itself, she replied. It brings forth a miniature facsimile of the sun that mimics the movement pattern of the actual sun, giving out the equivalent amount of heat and light, so don't look right at it. It's also much closer to the ground, and faster, so some flyers will need to watch where they're going, she asked in a cunning tone, glowering at Rainbow Dash, who glowered back. Ignoring Rainbow's glare, Twilight brought her head down, her alicorn glowing pink, then white. Sweat beaded at the base of her horn, and her knees shook as a ball of heat and light appeared above her head. Her 5 companions gaped in awe at the blinding ball of light swelled in size, before it darted off to the edge of Ponyville, where its brightness flared. True to Twilight's word, it brightened up the area around it, and the sky around it turned a deep midnight blue to merely a wonderful azure blue, but only just around it. Apart from the sky, though, Ponyville looked as bright as it had the day before. Twilight panted heavily. She had never cast that spell before, even though Queen Celestia had personally taught her it. Now she knew why. She was perhaps prepared for this day? In any case, a weight in her heart eased. For now, at least, her parents had sunlight. The sounds of hooves clopping reached her ears, as she looked up to see the 5 ponies whooping and cheering. But they weren't the only ones. Standing and flapping about them were dozens of Ponyville ponies. Earth ponies, unicorns, pegasi, all of them were stomping their hooves against the ground, giving her bright smiles and tears. Leave it to the pupil of the Queen herself to bring back the sun, cheered Demir, standing at the forefront of the herd. Long live Twilight Sparkle! Cheered the crowd. Twilight waved a hoof about her to hush the herd. Every pony listen! The crowd quieted itself, mostly. There was still an intermittent cheer now and again, but for the most part, it was enough for Twilight's words to be carried to the whole herd. That's not the real sun! That's just a substitute I called forth to keep Ponyville at ease in the daylight. It should last a week or so, if Nightmare Moon doesn't snuff it out by the day's end. She turned away from the crowd, preparing to gallop off. Wait! Called the mayor. Where are you going? To find the elements of harmony! Replied Twilight simply, looking over her shoulder. Rainbow Dash let out a frustrated groan. For Celestia's sake! Where are the elements of harmony? Twilight narrowed her eyes. I have a suspicion that they're in the abandoned palace of the 2 Alicorn queens, in the Everfree forest. The entire herd gasped. I said Pinkie Pie. Whee! She said, bouncing into the air, where she seemed to recover as her grooves wiggled. Let's go! Are you insane? Rainbow Dash said, with genuine fear in her voice. The Everfree Forest is like the most dangerous place in all of Equestria. For once, I agree with you, Rainbow, said Applejack, stepping toward Twilight. I don't know how much you learned about the Everfree up in them ivory towers of yours on Canterlot, Twilight, but that forest, ugh, she shivered. Take natural, none of it. How so? Twilight asked. The Everfree was not the subject of much study by Twilight Sparkle. She only knew that it was also known as the Forest of No Return, because no pony who ever went into the forest ever came back out, and it was a place of ancient and wild magic that no pony, not even Queen Celestia, could control. Well, Applejack began hesitantly, the plants grow. Animals care for themselves, breathed Fluttershy in a fearful shiver. And the clouds move, whimpered the ordinary cocky Rainbow Dash. Ow! On their own, the three of them cried. Twilight shuddered. The Everfree did sound like a fearsome and unwholesome place. She couldn't have imagined that the aura of evil magic around the forest was so great that no amount of moaning magic could even control the weather and wildlife around it. Still, the choices boiled down to braving the dangers of Everfree and its uncontrollable animal denizens, risking life and limb to retrieve the elements of harmony that only might be there, or remaining in the safe sanctuary of Ponyville, forgetting the elements of harmony, and substituting to the selenic reign of a madmare. There was no choice in Twilight's mind. I'm still going, Twilight said, digging her right forehoof against the ground. Hold up there, Sugar Cube, called Applejack, trotting up to Twilight's side with a soft smile. We've barely known you for a day, but don't get into your head that you gotta tackle this alone. You can bet your bottom beyond. Your friends are with you, towards the end. You really think any of you ponies are my friends? Snapped Twilight, trying not to let herself be affected by the looks of mingled shock, offense, and hurt on each of their faces. She pointed an accusing hoof at each mare in turn, who avoided her gaze in shame. You stuffed my face with every bit of food your family's ever cooked. You drenched me through to the bone and messed up my mane trying to dry me off. You tried to fit me into an improperly fitted corset and waste hours of time I could have spent trying to find information on Nightmare Moon. You throw a surprise party that I never wanted just because you think I want a friend, and you! She hesitated over Fluttershy. She couldn't think of anything Fluttershy had done to offend her, other than being cripplingly withdrawal. You! Ah! With a frustrated shout, Twilight collapsed onto her haunches. By now, the herd had awkwardly dispersed, leaving just Twilight and the 5 flummoxed fillies. Applejack looked hurt. Rainbow Dash was gritting her teeth in poorly repressed frustration. Rarity had a forehoof to her chest as she looked down at the ground with drooping ears. Piggy's mane's tail started to droop a bit as she actually started to turn blue. And Fluttershy looked on the verge of a breakdown. The call of a bird of some sort surprised the 6 of them, and Twilight looked up in shock. She knew that call! A burst of fire descended from the sky. Rainbow Dash recoiled from the direction of Canterlot. It materialized in the form of a gorgeous, eagle-like bird with fabulous bright red and burnt orange purlins. It held a rolled-up piece of parchment in its golden beak. Philomena! Twilight breathed, gaping at the phoenix. The bird nodded, her yellow eyes glinting warmly. Phil who what now? Asked Rainbow Dash. It's Queen Celestia's pet phoenix, Twilight explained, and it looks like she has a message. The moment Twilight's Shimmer grasped the scroll, Philomena let go, before alighting on top of Twilight's back, her black talons not digging into her flesh, but still grasping firmly. Twilight undid the sun-moon seal of the crown with the scroll, and undid the red ribbon underneath, and read the letter out loud. My dearest and most faithful student, Twilight Sparkle, should you be reading this right now, the Nightmare Moon has surely claimed my throne and imprisoned me. Philomena is truly one of my most exquisitely loyal companions, and the only one on hoof who I could trust to deliver this message to you. I pray that she found you with great speed, and that the everlasting night is still young. Even so, I have reason to believe that you did not take me seriously for my earlier assignment for you to make friends. That was no idle advice, my little pony. No one pony, not even me, could set things aright. Friendship is the greatest, most powerful magic in all of creation. If you have not yet made friends, or if your friends are not faithful to you, then all hope is lost to you, to Equestria, to Harmonia. You will need to make friends in order to save us all from Nightmare Moon, and to save her from herself. Remember, it only takes a single spark to light a fire. Your hopeful mentor, Queen Celestia, Alperonia de Equestria. If Queen Celestia had assumed that this letter would answer any of Twilight's questions, she was sorely mistaken. Twilight's mind was buzzing with even more questions than before. Save Nightmare Moon from herself? Nightmare Moon was a monster who would sooner see the world freeze in unending night than let the world's balance remain in check. Why in the wide world of Harmonia was Queen Celestia treating this like an exam? Many lives were at great risk for the return of Nightmare Moon, all of which were surely very dear to Queen Celestia. Why were friends such an important part of saving the world? Every pony who previously called Twilight friend were only in it for the social benefits of being associated with Queen Celestia's #1 student. And these 5 ponies, whom Twilight was being shadowed by, were some of the most contradictory ponies he ever met. Even as ungregarious as she was, Twilight thought it highly illogical for these 5 to be a close circle of friends. One was loud and brash. One was immensely introverted. One had no sense of personal space or when to shut up. One was very prim and proper. And one was still tracking dirt on her hose from apple bucking. Still, Queen Celestia had never steered Twilight Sparkle wrong before, and she swallowed her misgivings with a nod to Philomena. The phoenix gave a short caw before taking flight for the South Equestria's mountains. Looking back at the message again, though, another question came to Twilight's mind. Seemingly random letters had been written in a darker ink, as did the word spark in the last sentence. It could have simply been a light nib in the quill that the Queen had used, but there was some sort of pattern that Twilight thought she could discern.
I think Queen Celestia needs to work on her spelling, came Pinky's squeaky voice from over Twilight's shoulder. I don't think that dearest is a word, or fruited, or fierily, or imprisoned, or mouth, or truth. She really needs to not put a big letter into mebrits, which I don't think is a word either, or reason, or furiously, or fet, or friendship. Lost is a word, but I don't think it's an adjective like that. I mean, I don't know where Equestria is. And what does she mean by asking you to save us all for Nightmare Moon? And what was this herself she wants us to save Nightmare Moon from? And what is a single spark? How's it different from a normal spark? And how can it start a fire?
Twilight's eye twitched. Do you have any idea of personal space? She shouted, to which Pinky shook her head. Twilight sighed in frustration. It's the way she writes her S's, Pinky. It's how ponies wrote their letters over 1,000 years ago.
So, they didn't have S's back then? That must have been a tough life to lead. What if you needed to order a bar of soap, and got a whole bunch of soap instead? What would some pony do with a whole bunch of soap? What is soap, anyway? And what about hearts and hose day cards for your special sun pony? Did you just call each other special fun ponies instead? And what was the name sassafras pronounced Fafabrath? She giggled. They were a bunch of silly ponies back then.
It's just writing idiosyncrasy! She screamed, breathing heavily. Pinky, just bisschen so Schwarzkopf! Take a deep breath there, Sugar Cube, Applejack said levelly. Repeat after me. Applejack placed the forehoof on her chest, inhaling slowly and fully. Twilight mimicked her. Next, the farmer mare slowly pointed her foreleg ahead, exhaling just as steadily. Twilight followed suit, and found to her surprise that the tension that had been building up the past day had ebbed considerably. She smiled. She would have to remember this for future tests by the Queen. Taking a deep breath, Twilight faced the group again. All right, she said shortly. My explanation of Germain aside, you 5 can accompany me to find the elements of harmony. We'll have safety in numbers. Applejack reared off with a joyful yee-haw! Piggy prunked in the air with a woohoo! Fluttershy nodded her assent with a soft smile. Rarity let out a sigh of relief, and Rainbow dashed in a victory loop-de-loop. But don't think this means that I'm overlooking how overbearing some of you have been, Twilight said sharply. The sooner we get this over with. She hesitated. She was burning bridges that she would need to cross, as she continued to say what she needed to say. The sooner I'll never have to see you five again. The sooner we can bring back the day. Rainbow Dash nodded with a frown. Fine then, we'll do things your way. Just don't count on us to hold our tongues just 'cause you're the Queen's little egghead. Well there, Rainbow, Applejack snapped. Don't get too uppity now. We all gotta stay together if we're going to make it through the Everfree. Ugh. She simmered slightly. Her ears drooped as she rubbed a scar running down her right foreleg. I never thought I'd be going back there after. She shook her head once or twice, placing a smile on her nuzzle, and giving Twilight a bright green gaze. You ain't got to worry none, Sugar Cube. We're gonna stick to you like caramel on a candy apple. She galloped past Twilight, beelining for the Everfree. After a moment, Rainbow Dash, Rarity, and Fluttershy followed suit.
Especially if there is candy apples in there,
Piggy squeaked in delight. Twilight quirked a sapphire eyebrow at her. Piggy looked back, confused by Twilight's confusion.
What? They're good.
The 6 mares stood well beyond the borders of Ponyville, beneath the canopy of the trees at the very edge of the Everfree forest. Each and every one of them shivered involuntarily. The forest excluded a sickly aura that told them that they were plainly unwelcome. The lowest hanging branches seemed to be swaying of their own accord, as though they were claws trying to reach down and snap up the nearest pony. Beyond the thicket which engulfed the crumbling stone boundaries of the olden settlement around the palace, there seemed to be a pitch blackness, even with the miniature sun that Twilight had summoned on the other side. Pinky arched an eyebrow, rubbing her leg.
My knee's getting all pinchy.
Applejack looked up at her fellow Earth pony, muttering darkly, You better get used to that here in the Everfree, Planky. Twilight gave the two an odd look.
What?
I'll explain after this is all over, answered Applejack.
Do I even want to know?
Thought Twilight.
I've never been this close to the Everfree before,
Fluttershy whimpered.
and I hope I never return after this day,
Rarity said, dramatically, flicking a cloven hoof to her forehead. Applejack was rubbing the scar on the forearm of her right foreleg still more vigorously. She was staring blankly ahead, as though she were trying to look at something beyond the Everfree forest. Twilight noticed this.
Are you all right?
Applejack gave a start, blinking at Twilight. She scratched the back of her head. Sorry about that, Twi. I'm just reminiscing on a painful memory. Applejack held her head up high and fixed her face in a glare. But the past is the past, Applejack said. I got one job, and that's to keep y'all safe. I'll swear my honor as an apple that you'll make it out this here forest.
Yeah, that's cool and all,
drawled Rainbow Dash.
but we gotta hurry and snag those elements before Nightmare Moon does, and she's got a major head start on us.
Rainbow Dash is right, Twilight said, as he dug in her hose, preparing to gallop.
Time is of the essence, and we need to get through to the palace and the elements as fast as possible. With me!
And with that, 6 mares galloped and flew into the Everfree forest. And the Everfree was terrible from the outside. The being inside it was indefinitely worse. The moment they crossed into the threshold, it was as though the outside world had gone completely silent and subsequently fallen out of existence. The path was almost impossible to keep to, and there was a pervasive feeling that something was watching them. But whenever any of them looked out into the darkness between the tree trunks, they just saw empty blackness. If they could just know who or what was watching them, there would be some surety as to what to feel about it. It was physically and mentally exhausting, ears twitching at every little snap of a twig that one of the party of 6 would tread upon. It was as though the entire world had disappeared, except for those 6 in the Everfree. But mingling with the oppressive atmosphere of the Everfree around them was a blue filter of pure malice, intermittently in the distance, sometimes off to the left, or the right, or even behind. A faint twinkle of stars could be made out. Nightmare Moon was watching their every move, but from where?
So,
Twilight began, her head swimming.
none of the rest of you were in here either? Heavens, no!
cried Rarity, looking aghast at the very thought.
Just look around. This place is positively dreadful.
You can say that again, Applejack said. After a few moments, she turned to Twilight. If you don't mind if I ask you a question, Sugar Cube?
What about?
Twilight replied. Well, I didn't have you paid for one of them Germain ponies. Where did you get it from? Twilight frowned to herself a little, before recalling her outburst at Pinkie earlier that, well, technically not earlier that day, but earlier nonetheless. She answered matter-of-factly. My father, Knucklet, was an astronomer from Germany who married into the House of Twilight. I picked up Germain as a second language from him. She found herself smiling at Applejack. I actually know quite a few languages from modern Equest. I know Old Equest, Germain, Fancy, Neighborhoods.
I got a question for you too, egghead.
Rainbow Dash cut in. Twilight blinked, glowering at the Pegasus as he continued to trot forward.
Egghead? Yeah, egghead,
repeated Rainbow Dash.
You read a lot of books, so you should know exactly what made the Everfree Forest this way.
Twilight narrowed her eyes at Rainbow Dash.
I'm not an egghead. I'm just well read. And besides, I have no idea why the forest is this way.
She cast her eyes about uneasily.
It was not covered in any of the books I read, and I read plenty of theories by leading thaumaturgus regarding Everfree mana. Queen Celestia never told me why either, though she hinted it was related to a great battle long before Nightmare Moon. A great battle?
Fluttershy echoed.
Against who?
Twilight shook her head.
Never said, but that's not important right now. What is getting through this Everfree forest quickly and...
At that moment, Twilight turned her head to face forward, and almost fell face first off a cliff into a ravine. It was only through Rainbow Dash's timely climbing down on Twilight's tail skirt and pulling her back that she was saved. Twilight's eyes widened at the near miss she had. They were petrified wooden poles that were doubtlessly once part of a wooden bridge across the ravine, apparently having rotted away centuries ago. She gave a gasp of relief.
I never thought I'd say this, but thank you, Rainbow Dash,
she said with a genuine smile. Rainbow Dash grinned, her fangs glinting in the dim moonlight.
Don't sweat it! Though it was kinda your fault to begin with. You were so distracted babbling on with your eggheadedness that you almost wiped off yourself!
And then the cliff gave way, sending Twilight, Applejack, Pinkie Pie, and Rarity down the steep slope under the cliffs. Fluttershy, by instinct, took to the air to join Rainbow Dash.
Let's get him, Flutters!
Smirked Rainbow Dash, diving down toward the four mares rolling down the slope.
Oh my goodness,
gasped Fluttershy, following her old Pegasus friend. The pair of Pegasi managed to grab up Pinkie and Rarity before they rolled too far, but Applejack and Twilight continued to tumble. Applejack's hose began to glow a grassy green as he planted her forehose onto the slope. She continued to slide, but far slower, eventually stopping. Twilight was not so lucky. She was standing the closest to the edge of the cliff, and so was the furthest down the slope, reaching the point where the steepness became vertical. Desperately, she clung to the cliff face, trying not to fall, but it was proving fruitless.
Hold on, Twilight!
called Applejack, the green glow of her hose fading as she gently slid down the last few meters to Twilight's side. She wrapped her hose around Twilight as tightly as she could, stabilizing her hold. Twilight took a deep breath of relief.
Thank you, Applejack. Just don't let go, okay?
Don't you worry none, Sugar Cube, smiled Applejack, her hind hooves glowing green against the slope.
I ain't never letting you go!
Against her better judgment, Twilight looked around beneath her. Over 24 meters below, Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy had respectively set down Pinkie Pie and Rarity, and were beginning to fly up to help Twilight. Twilight looked at Applejack and nodded.
Okay, Applejack, they're on their way. Let go!
Applejack blinked bemusedly at Twilight. Are you sure, Twilight? I got a right firm grip and all. I ain't letting you go until I'm sure you land safe like. After a few moments, during which Applejack ascertained that the two Pegasi were close enough to catch Twilight, she slowly loosened her grip on the lavender unicorn. She fell less than a meter into their waiting hosts. Fluttershy fumbled slightly, but managed.
Oh, sorry about that, Twilight.
Fluttershy said softly, as Applejack deftly leapt down the footholds onto the cliff face, her host flashing green as she made contact with each little ledge.
I'm terribly not used to carrying anything heavier than a bunny or two.
That's all right, Fluttershy, smiled Twilight. I owe you 3 my life, Rainbow, Applejack, and you. Fluttershy blushed, the 3 of them settling down at the bottom of the ravine.
Oh, my stars, Twilight!
Rarity gasped, a relieved smile on her muzzle.
Thank the Maker you're all right.
Twilight waved a hoof in dismissal as Applejack landed amongst the party. I think I have some ponies closer than that to thank, she said. I'm really starting to question how far I've made it through here without you girls. Rainbow Dash scoffed. There are just some things that ponies can't share without ending up liking each other, and taking a tumble off a cliff is one of them. The instant she finished speaking, the rainbow-maned Pegasus gripped her lips shut, and pupils pinpricks. Twilight smirked in spite of the situation. Ooh, looks like I'm not the only egghead around here, she said shyly. I didn't quite peg you for a fan of the Daring Do series, Rainbow Dash. I don't know what you're talking about, said Rainbow Dash hesitantly, her muzzle scrunched up and eyes darting back and forth. Fluttershy giggled, and the other 4 joined in. Rainbow Dash frowned, her ears flattening against her head. A loud roar, like a trumpet blast, broke the light atmosphere. Immediately, the 6 ponies tensed, prepared to gallop in an instant.
Oh no,
Fluttershy breathed.
What was that?
I have an idea, Twilight said in a dreading tone. I hope I'm wrong. A distant growling became pretty clear to the party, and off down the ravine they could make out a large, hunched shape approaching. Step closer. It became clear what it was. A large, crimson-like creature with black spines down its back, a maroon scorpion's tail, an albino equine face with golden eyes. A manticore! Twilight shrieked. The manticore reared onto its hind legs and bellowed its trumpet-like roar once more, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth, before charging the group on all fours. A pair of ebony pincers raised above its back. The Pegasi took to the air over it, dodging its pincers, while the unicorns and earth ponies dodged to either side. If there's a manticore here, Twilight panted, galloping down the path the manticore had been blocking, the other 5 not far from behind. This Chimera might has to be nearby, Applejack finished. Let's all get out of here before... Almost as soon as the words left Applejack's mouth, a large creature dropped down directly in front of them from a cloud of starry blue mist. It had the head and front half of a tiger, a goat's head to the left of its tiger's head, goat legs, and a snake for a tail.
Where do you think you're going?
Rumbled the Chimera's tiger's head.
Our husband was just inviting you to dinner,
bleated the goat head.
Yes,
hissed the snake's head.
And you 3 are the main course.
Piggy prompted eagerly.
Can I be the dessert?
Her pony companions, the manticore and Chimera, tilted their heads into the side in confusion.
Mrs. Chimera,
Fluttershy began softly.
If it's not too much trouble, would it be all right if you and your husband let us go? Just this once?
Twilight gave Fluttershy a look of befuddlement. The tiger head purred in thought.
I think not,
it said.
Husband and my sisters haven't eaten in days.
It was common for one head on a chimera to refer to its other 2 heads as its sisters.
We were about to turn in for a day.
But the sun is still asleep,
the goat head said gleefully.
And while the sun sleeps, we are awake. So, prepare to become 6 supple helpings of Philly filet,
growled the snakehead with mirth. An idea flashed into Twilight's mind. Every pony, grab onto me! Her companions didn't need to be told twice. She looked up to the cliff face above the ravine. taking careful note that it was the opposite cliff from the one she'd fallen off of. She knew they would not land on top of it directly, but maybe a meter or two over it. But it was better than to be devoured by chimericals. The Manticore and Chimera were wise to the fact that their prey was up to something, and after a moment of hesitation, they both dived at the party at the same time. Half a second too slow, the six of them vanished in a sparkling flash of purple light, leaving the Manticore and Chimera to crash into one another face first. Infuriated by their loss, they began to maul one another. Twilight Sparkle had seldom winked out before, and the sensation was as unpleasant as it always was, as though every single particle of her being were being squeezed through an extremely narrow keyhole. It couldn't have been any easier for her travel companions. Side-winking was not easy when Queen Celestia first demonstrated for Twilight. After an eternal instant of infinite compression, Twilight could breathe again, and felt herself flopping against the grass. Down in the ravine, she could hear the chimericals tearing each other apart. Up on the cliffside with her, she could hear Rainbow Dash retching. "Ugh, what in tarnation was that?" asked Applejack woozily.
That,
explained Twilight,
was the last resort. I don't like to wink out at the best of times, but that was the only way out of there with all of us in one piece.
Rainbow Dash wiped her mouth off on her forearms.
Yeah, well, that was majorly uncomfortable, so please don't do it again!
Twilight glared.
You're welcome for saving your life! Girls, please!
Declared Rarity. Her mane and tail were sticking out in every direction.
As distasteful as I found that particular excursion into inner space to be, we simply must be pressing on.
They pushed forward into the forest.
Ah,
Pinky mused at the back of the group.
But I wanted to be dessert!
The path through the Everfree forest dangled down, though not by much, and the thicket overhead forbade much moonlight from showing through. They followed the path at the mouth of the forest was not steady, but the one they were following now, that path made it seem like it was paved out of a mirror. Roots seemed to pull themselves up to trick the six travelers up. Trod upon stones had an unfortunate habit of dislodging just as a mare put her weight on it. Both such events leading to much stumbling and cursing by the mares. What spots were not eaten up by roots or rocks was moist and boggy, so that one could not keep her hooves in place for far too long, or the suction would make it difficult to move on. The air was stifling, and there was a stiff heat around them that made them blurry. Their coats stuck tightly to their skin. 2.5 dozen minutes, a half hour, had passed in such a manner, with little said of any substance, and any conversation was quick and hushed. Tension was mounting, as was a degree of impatience. How much further into the Everfree was Queen Celestia's old castle anyway?
Remember how far I doubted I would make it into the Everfree?
Twilight said burlesquely.
Yeah,
said Rainbow Dash slowly.
I take it back.
What? The Rainbow Mane Pegasus bellowed and raised. The other four stopped, making similarly affronted exclamations.
But I saved you from walking off the... Gah!
She smacked her face with her hoof.
I'm grateful, don't get me wrong,
continued Twilight, which lessened the tension somewhat.
But I wouldn't have been needed saving if some pony didn't call me an egghead to begin with. I would not have had to worry about those chimericals if some pony didn't try to reason with them. You leave Fluttershy out of this!
Rainbow Dash screamed, her nostrils flaring and ears flattening.
She tried her best! And,
Twilight pressed on,
I probably would have been able to wink across the course myself, not wasting potentially valuable mana winking 5 other ponies.
So what? Rainbow Dash snapped, folding her forelegs. You want us to go back to Ponyville so you can hug all the glory? Gas, Applejack said tentatively, raising a foreleg. Put a cork in it, KG! Barked Rainbow Dash.
I want to hear it.
Straight from the horse's mouth.
You think I got involved in this mess for
glory? Glory has nothing to do with this, growled Twilight.
I just don't want
any blood on my hooves,
Rainbow Dash growled, but Rarity placed a dainty and muddy hoof on Rainbow Dash's shoulder, causing her to withdraw as Rarity advanced. As much as we appreciate your concern, darling,
interjected Rarity,
did that not seem a remarkably insensitive way to put it?
Twilight gave Rarity an intense glare.
Insensitive?
She repeated.
Well, I'm sorry that I lost my parents at a young age due to my own lack of control over my mana output. My sensitivity was trampled to pulp ages ago. I don't think so, dear,
Rarity said, and by the dim light she seemed to be smiling faintly.
I have seen how you treat your surrogate dragon son.
He is not my son, Twilight interrupted.
I just hatched his egg with my magic. Nevertheless, he's still very fond of you. And you, too, hold him near and dear, do you not?
I guess.
No guessing. Yes or no. Is Little Spike dear to you?
Yes, he is.
See that, Grumpy Gracie?
Piped Pinkie Pie, who was bouncing on her forelegs upside down, somehow not sinking into the mud.
You're a real softy after all.
Fluttershy nodded in agreement. I still think you were being a jerk, Rainbow said derisively. Rainbow! Shouted Applejack, before facing Twilight with a gentle expression. Now listen, Circle Cube. We're all getting a little hot under the hitch collar here in the Everfree. But that don't mean we gotta be feuding and all. You can't be ruminating on the Kudo bands or model bands all the time. You could do that till the cows come home. Besides, you didn't drag any of us out here. We came with you 'cause you're our friend. We ain't leaving you. Come to Taurus or high water. Twilight looked down at her hose. Now she felt ashamed of her earlier statement. She had not meant for it to come across as insensitive as it had. She had never exactly found the books on socialization to be all that important, and when she did bother to read them, nothing seemed to stick. But why did she care? These ponies weren't her friends. They just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. And now they were in all some maker-forsaken forest where their lives were in peril at any given moment. Looking up, she saw each of them giving an expectant look, except Rainbow Dash, who was hovering in the air, glowering off to her right. I'm sorry, Twilight said softly and sincerely. I've just never been with other ponies who liked me for me before. Get a lot swarming with all sorts of social climbers, ain't it? Applejack queried. Twilight nodded. Wait! Rainbow Dash said, bolting upright. Aren't we supposed to be nabbing some stinking elements so we can get out of the stinking forest? Twilight stood erect herself. You're right. Everlasting darkness has gone on long enough. We need to get moving. The sound of creaking branches was heard. Fluttershy let out a sharp eep and clutched Rainbow Dash in a vice. What?
What's that?
Asked Rarity tensely. It spoke to the atmosphere of the forest that Pinkie did not ask if this was a guessing game.
We're going to find out. Then we're going to run,
Twilight said, lighting up her Alicorn with a basic illumination spell. The undergrowth looked perfectly normal, save for a few oddly shaped logs in the distance. There was no sign that any predators had been anywhere near them. Twilight, said a suddenly shaky and pale Applejack. Twilight faced the farmer mare.
What's wrong, Applejack?
Behind you! Twilight turned and impulsively fired a successive force spell. Something large and wooden and alive went flying backwards into a tree, its eyes glowing with an unearthly green light. Its lupine body splintered into many pieces. The glow in its eyes faded. Run! Applejack screamed, galloping further into the forest. The 5 others followed without hesitation. The oddly shaped logs ahead suddenly leapt up, exposing glowing green eyes, branches for limbs, twigs for ears and tails, long thick thorns for claws and teeth. The screams of 5 ponies echoed weirdly in the forest. They might have covered the same distance in 5 minutes they covered the past 2 dozen and a half, but time was lost on the 6 galloping ponies. All that mattered was evading their pursuers, those monstrous tree creatures. Applejack leapt up over one of the monsters, coming down on top of another with all 4. the beast shattering under her glowing hooves, before she propelled herself off with a powerful leap. Twilight caught the shrapnel in her glimmer shimmer, sending the pieces flying at deadly speed at the other creatures, shattering them. Rarity kept her head down and charged blindly, crying out in fright and hoping she did not run into the unearthly beast. Fluttershy tried to fly as close as she could to the canopy of trees, thorny teeth snapping at her hooves. Pinkie Pie played hopscotch on the heads of creatures, burying their muzzles deep in the mud. Rainbow Dash barreled straight through the monsters, striking off splinters that dug into her forearms, shielding her eyes. In time, the sixth pony came to a thinning of the trees, and finally to a stream. Somehow, someway, they had survived that ordeal. Each and every one of them was panting heavily, trying to fight the stitches in their barrels. The ordeal had left them disheveled, sweaty, and mud caked around their hooves.
What? Those beasts!
Gasped Rarity. They were Timberwolves, Applejack replied hoarsely in answer. She doffed her Stetson. Spirits of the Everfree, inhabiting dead tree parts.
I think I read about them,
Twilight panted.
Not a single thaumaturgus was able to successfully find out how their magic works.
Magic don't matter to them abominations, snarled Applejack. All they want is to eat ponies. Don't even lead to it either. They just kill and eat things for the sport of it. Her eyes darkened. A Timberwolf pack attacked the farm the day Applebloom was born. Applejack was too young to fight him, so Pa fought him off. Alone. She bowed her head. He didn't like it. Twilight gasped in horror.
I'm so sorry, Applejack.
Applejack shook her head with a sad smile.
"'Tain't worth fussing over. I loved Pa and he loved us.
We had a swell time together in this life, and he laid his life down for Sweet Apple Acres, for us. And for what it's worth." She smiled brightly at Twilight. "Not a single Timberwolf dare come near Sweet Apple Acres to 10 years since." A high, mirthful laugh reached their ears. The five of them leapt up, spooked, wondering where in Harmonia that laughing was coming from. Looking down, they saw Pinkie Pie, rolling about in the dewy grass at the stream's edge, almost literally laughing her head off.
"Pinkie Pie,"
Twilight queried,
"why are you laughing?"
Pinkie Pie struggled back to her hooves, hiccuping through her last few giggles.
"Because we're alive!" she said gleefully. "Those mean old Timberwolves were sure scary puns. I mean, of course they were scary. The trees that come to life and try to bite your patootie off, that would be like getting a gigagross of splinters all over your body."
"Yeah, isn't that just terrible?" snarked Rainbow Dash, who was busy biting splinters out of her forearms.
"And that's if the Timberwolf doesn't try to body slam you. How could you imagine how painful that would be? I mean, that would be like a rock falling you. Well, I was fine that one time a rock fell on my head back at the Ron farm, but that's probably because I don't let things like that bother me. A rock can't keep on trying to body slam you. Can it? I should ask Maud. But anyway, we made it out, and I'm laughing because we made it out, and we're that much closer to getting the pretty shiny rainbow things."
Twilight barely caught any of what Pinkie had said, because of how fast he had been speaking, and judging from the looks of her five companions' faces, they were not much clearer on it. But, still, she got the basic message, and soon a bubbly came up from her lungs. Before long, Twilight and her five companions were rolling on the grass, laughing about their merriment and relief. For about 5 minutes, they completely forgot about their quest, and Nightmare Moon, and the everlasting night. For 5 minutes, they just laughed. Twilight brought a cloven hoof to her eye, wiping away a tear of mirth. Regardless of how this ended, whether it ended with Nightmare Moon annihilated by the elements of harmony, or with the Queen of the Night cackling triumphantly over their dead bodies, she would always remember this moment.
"How did that start, Pinkie?" she asked. Pinkie giggled. "That's That's a funny question, Twilight. I don't get what you mean.
What I mean is, when did you start laughing about things like that? Pinky put a pink hoof to her chin and thought. After a moment, a surprisingly pensive expression crossed her face.
Well, before my Granny Pie went off to the Elysian Fields, she told me not to cry at her funeral, but to laugh. She wanted me to remember the good times I spent with her, like the time she taught me to giggle at the ghosties in my closet, instead of letting all those sad feelings take over. Laugh is to enjoy the good times, and to endure the bad. That's what she always told me.
Twilight gaped. She wasn't expecting such sage response from such a random mare as Pinkie Pie. Well, Rainbow Dash said abruptly, stretching her forelegs. She was actually standing on the ground, as opposed to flying. We made it out, so what we say, take 5, graze a little. Get our energy back. Truth be told, despite the urgency of their pressing on, Twilight had to agree with Rainbow Dash. She had not any food to speak of since the brunch at Sweet Apple Acres the previous morning, and after the hurricane of events that turned her life upside down in the past few hours, she was feeling positively starved. She nodded her consent to the Pegasus idea, and the other 4 followed suit. For the next several minutes, the 6 of them simply stood in a circle, kneeling down, taking clumps of grass in their teeth, and simply grazing. The Everfree grass was coarser and less enticing than any grass any of them had ever eaten, but in sense of desperate location, they could not afford to be choosy about what sustained them. Rarity, who fancied herself a mare of haute couture, was particularly hesitant to graze on Everfree grass, but she conceded in the end. After she felt satisfied with the grass she grazed upon, Twilight trotted up the stream to take a sip. Upon closer inspection, though, the water looked slightly stagnant, if not slightly tense, as though anticipating some sort of altercation. Thinking twice, she trotted back up from the stream. Any idea how we're going to cross this? She asked her 5 comrades. I don't think we should cross by hoof.
Hello?
Said Rainbow Dash dryly, flapping her wings.
Oh, right. Well, 'cause you and Fluttershy...
No can do, Bookworm, Rainbow Dash said with a shake of her head.
Bookworm,
Twilight hissed. Pegasi are good at slowing down other ponies who are falling, not lifting them up.
We're so sorry,
Fluttershy whimpered, her ears drooping slightly as she hid her face behind her mane. Rainbow Dash gave her a sidelong glance.
Don't worry about it,
replied the lavender unicorn slightly.
I could just link every pony else across. Now,
said Pinky, jumping back and forth on alternating forelegs and hind legs.
I can make it across with a hop, skip, and a jump!
With each successive hop, skip, and jump, Pinkie Pie made a higher and higher jump, finally bounding across the stream in a single leap. Twilight gaped.
How did she do that?
Applejack shrugged. You'll get used to stuff like that while you live with Pinkie Pie for a while. I'll bet it's something to do with that Pegasus grandma of hers. Twilight scratched her chin.
Makes as much sense as anything else.
As Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy glided across the stream to join Pinkie, Twilight looked back to Rarity. The alabaster unicorn was no longer quite alabaster. Her coat had been stained by mud and grass. Her mane and tail were lank and damp, respectively sticking to her face and hind legs. Granted, it looked better than the zebra look her mane produced when frazzled by a side winking.
You'll have to wink out alongside me again, Rarity,
Twilight said simply.
Rarity sighed. If I must.
She wrapped a hoof delicately around one of Twilight's.
Think you can make the jump on your own, Applejack?
Asked Twilight to the farmer mare. I'd rather not chance it. I think I'll tag along with you and the fashionista. Applejack approached Twilight and Rarity, circling around as to be on Twilight's other side from Rarity. She took Twilight's other forehoof.
I appreciate your distance from me, Applejack,
Rarity said aloofly.
Some of us are trying to maintain some semblance of sophistication in this terrific place.
Sophistication? Applejack snapped. The Everfree's no place for sophisticated lass. We gotta get through and get the job done.
girls. Let's not fight, murmured Twilight. If you please, Twilight, said Rarity, with a barely restrained irritance. I would like to remind Applejack that some ponies take offense at looking like an absolute mess all the time. Well, sometimes you gotta be the man of big mess if you want to get the job done quick like. Girls, I'll have you know, Applejack, that a mare of my standards takes great pride in her appearance. Do you have any idea how long it takes me to get this coif, this mane and tail? Probably longer than it'd take to find the elements if we did things your way. I bet you we wouldn't have even gone now Ponyville about this point. Appearances must be upheld. Without beauty within and without, what does a mare truly have? Look around you! It's puss new already, and the moon's still out, and this eternal night's gonna be one a heck of a lot longer if we don't get those elements pronto! Girls, there is simply no reason to allow one's hoof care to go to waste. Are you saying my hooves aren't well kept? How do you think I'm such a good bucker? Oh, you buck trees with your hooves? I thought it was with your thick skull. You're the one with the thick skull around here. Girls! Twilight Shimmer grabbed hold of Applejack and Rarity, pulling them apart from her and each other. In their anger, they had almost forgotten Twilight was there. The lavender unicorn's ears were flat against her skull, and her purple eyes were shifting between the two bickering mares. This bickering is not going to help us get to the elements faster, she growled. She's the one who started, said Applejack, pointing an accusing hoof at Rarity. Started it? Rarity gasped. Ladies do not start fights. She narrowed her eyes at Applejack's. But they can't finish them. I don't care which one of you started it, Twilight shouted. Neither of you are making any of this easier. Not for me, and especially not for each other. This entire trip to the Everfree could have been so much easier if you five weren't trying to be my friends. I don't need friends, especially not if this is what friends do. All of this bickering back and forth between the two of you has only made my mind even more muddled, and I have got half a mind just to throw you two dumbcasts across. With a last frustrated growl, Twilight made her good on her threat, and hurled the farmer mare and her fellow unicorn across the stream. Her mind temporarily cleared by her outburst. She winked across to a spot 5 paces away from the three who had already crossed. Just as Rarity landed on her rump just on the edge of the other side of the stream. Applejack, who regained her bearings quicker than Rarity, had already flipped around, one hoof holding the Stetson to her head, her hind legs poised for a landing. Just short of the riverbank, with a splash, the stream's surface instantly began to violently roil, large rocky shapes clambering freely for the apple farming earth pony. Applejack gave a start, leaping straight over the other 5, and landing at the mouth of the trees ahead of them. Spooked, her 5 companions backed several paces away from the riverbank. It's a basket of crocodiles! She cried. The crocodilian rock monsters snapping at the riverbank for prey that was no longer there. That must have been why the water was so still. This here is crocodile territory! And I dare say we keep it that way, quavered Rarity, galloping past Applejack deeper into Everfree. I'll never agree with you more in my life, concurred Applejack, following her. Twilight, Pinky, and the 2 Pegasi were about to take off after Applejack and Rarity, when the stream began to stir even more violently. Peering closely, Twilight understood quickly what was going on. A pot of cool had apparently just encroached upon the crocodiles' hunting territory, while looking for more promising feeding grounds, and the blue crustacean beasts were currently locked in a turf war with the stoning ambush predators, claws and tentacles clashed with rocky fangs and tails. I think we better go after those 2 before one side wins and realizes that there's 4 very tasty ponies waiting just on the shore, Twilight said in a strained tone. I agree, Fireside breathed, before galloping along the path Rarity and Applejack had taken. Twilight turned to follow, and found herself muzzle to muzzle with Rainbow Dash. You really don't know what friends do together, do you? She asked. Twilight, baffled by such a question from Rainbow Dash, found herself shaking her head.
Rainbow Dash sighed. Then I think you might be in for a bit of a shocker. Rarity and Applejack aren't friends.
What?
Yeah, you heard me. They argue like that all the time whenever they meet at the market. I mean, they don't hate each other, but they don't like to spend more time together than they need to. I mean, what do they really have in common? Rarity's a fro-fro fashion freak, and Applejack gets dirty bucket trees for dawn till dusk. I bet Tartarus will freeze over before they have a conversation that doesn't end in shouting. Twilight breathed heavily out her nostrils. I feel really bad throwing them like that. They could have gotten hurt, even if there weren't crocodiles in the stream. Yeah, that was pretty lame. Hey! I'm just calling it as I see it, Rainbow shrugged, before she bolted down after Fluttershy. With a heavy sigh, Twilight made her ready to gallop after them.
Every pony needs friends, you know.
Twilight found herself giving a wide-eyed look at Pinkie. Since when had this pony been so full of wisdom? Pinkie just gave a wide smile.
There's no pony out there who's happy without friends. I mean, there's probably some kind of weirdo who's out there who's sure that he doesn't need ponies to hang out with and share jokes with and eat cupcakes and prank each other with. But you're not that kind of weirdo, Twilight.
Pinkie patted Twilight's mane with a bright pink hoof, eyes twinkling.
You're the funny kind of weird.
Pinkie took off with a skipping gallop. Twilight simply stared after the pink pony, flabbergasted. Did Pinkie said that she thinks I'm weird? Shaking her head, Twilight reared up and took off after them. Maybe I do need friends, but these 5 wouldn't exactly be my first choices. The third pass of Everfree Forest that the 6 of them walked through was less oppressively enclosed, and cooler to boot, which was a welcome reprieve from the stifling hotness of the one just prior to the stream of crocodiles. However, the tension had not let up. If anything, it had only escalated. The trees in this area were flowering with some of the most unwholesome-looking fruit that any of them had ever seen. Not a single one of them thought of bucking the fruit down for a bit of portable edibles, even before some of the fruit started to stir. Twilight took a deep breath. Applejack? Rarity? The 2 addressees turned to face Twilight.
Yes, darling.
What's the India, Secretary?
I'd like to apologize for throwing you 2 over the stream,
she said carefully.
Everything is just really piling up on top of everything else, and I lost my cool.
I wouldn't blame you if you 2 didn't want me as a friend anymore. She bowed her head, closing her eyes. Twilight, came Applejack's voice, and Twilight opened her eyes to see that the farmer mare was smiling genially. What kind of friend would I be if I stopped calling you a friend over one little outburst? I should be apologizing for putting you in such a situation.
No, I should be the one who apologizes, Rarity said, stepping forward. I was the one who started the altercation, despite my otherwise ladylike demeanor. So, I shall accept full responsibility for your fit of temper.
Bet you're not as sour as I am.
I do believe I am.
Are not all 2. Are not all 2. Girls! Twilight shouted, torn between screaming and laughing. Let's get a move on and get those elements. Bring back the sun and Queen Celestia and get out of this nasty place. Well, you better scratch that first one off the list, said Rainbow Dash slowly. Twilight looked ahead from Applejack and Rarity to see Rainbow pointing through the gap between the trees, some faces ahead. 'Cause I think we found something. Following along Rainbow's pointed hoof, Twilight saw across, through the swirling clouds of fog and mist, the crumbling battlements of the guard towers of an ancient castle. Twilight beamed for what felt like the first time in her life. "We're almost there!" she cried, galloping forward. "Wait for us, Twi!" Applejack shouted after her. Twilight smiled back at Applejack, but almost immediately felt the ground vanish from her forehoofs. Flailing about somewhat, Twilight's heart leapt into her throat at the slope she had almost taken a nasty stumble down into the foggy chasm. She felt her tail being yanked back, and looked back to see Rainbow Dash unclamping her teeth from the tuft at the end. Rainbow Dash offered a light humor-filled smile, so unlike her cocky, borderline feral grin.
What is it with you and falling off cliffs today?
Twilight looked down at the ancient castle, just as the fog began to drift aside. She caught sight of 5 or 6 large towers, but little else. She squinted. The castle seemed too far low to have been the former capital of Equestria for a mega grossum and a half.
The castle is sinking, she concluded. We'll have to slide down the slope. Whee!
Pinkie cried, curling up into a ball and rolling down the slope.
Pinkie Pie, wait!
Twilight called, racing out futilely with a grating sigh. She turned to the others.
All right, Every Pony, we gotta follow her, but carefully.
She lit up her alicorn, her heart glowing as she slid down the slope at a brisk but controlled speed. Rarity looked ruefully at her host.
But I've ruined my best horseshoes.
Then take 'em off! Applejack shouted, leaping down and bracing for impact, her own host glowing with a faint, light green even before she touched the earthy slope. Turning to watch Rainbow Dash bolt down the slope, Fluttershy meekly shouting her, Rarity bit her lip, sat on her haunches, and looked down at her forelobes, and
What you waiting for, Rarity?
piped up Pinkie Pie.
I'm contemplating taking off my... Wait, what?
Before the alabaster unicorn could say another word, Pinkie grabbed Rarity's forehost between her own and pulled her down. The whole slide down, Pinkie squealed with delight, and Rarity screamed with fright.
I swear that I was the first one down,
Rainbow Dash repeated.
I didn't even see Pinkie on the way down.
They were standing on the wrecked remains of what was surely the great stone bridge that spanned a majestic moat now long dry. The bridge must have snapped at some point as the castle sunk into the earth, turning it into a large cobblestone ramp leading up to the palace. Twilight rubbed her chin, eyes scrunched shut.
That doesn't even make sense. Even with your speed, Rainbow Dash. She should have made it down the first with that head start. Could she have wandered off and around the bridge?
Applejack looked down the swirly eddies of mist under the slanted bridge, doubtful. A delighted squeal reached their ears as Pinkie and Rarity slid down to the other 4 ponies. Pinkie doing a double front flip as she did so, landing on her hind legs with a bright "Ta-da!" Rarity, meanwhile, was lying at Pinkie's hooves, shuddering.
How did you do that?
Twilight asked.
I thought the slide was fun, so I went back up to do it again and get Rarity.
Pinkie grinned. Twilight stroked her chin again. She wouldn't put it past Pinkie to do that, but something didn't quite add up. After a moment, she shrugged. Pinkie was probably just a fast runner that might have just covered in a cloud of mist. Or maybe Rainbow Dash didn't look properly. Besides, there were bigger issues at the hoof than Pinkie's weirdness. Well, guys, we're almost there, said Twilight with a degree of finality, facing up to the ancient palace of the 2 Alicorn queens. She began to trot up to the bridge with deliberation. The angle was treacherous, and one wrong step could send her tumbling down and potentially off. The problem was exacerbated by the fact that the fog was frustratingly thick down here, and she could barely see 5 paces ahead. Reckon you could do something about this here fog, Twilight? Asked Applejack, squinting, with her Stenson pulled down low past her forelock.
Just give me a moment,
Twilight replied, already lighting up her horn with a basic wind spell that would disperse the fog long enough for them to scale this bridge. Hopefully. In moments, the Dwemer shimmer expanded outwards with surprising speed, dimming as it sped away from its caster, creating a sound like a soft-sonic boom. The fog cleared in a circle around them, at least 20 meters to each side. And so, Twilight Sparkle and her companions beheld the palace of the 2 Alicorn queens. Tall, imposing, and proud, the palace was once the crown jewel of the diarchy of Equestria. Now, time and neglect after a fierce battle had taken their cumulative toll on the castle. Gouge marks and holes had been blasted in many walls, and some towers ended abruptly and roughly, likely during the decisive battle between Queen Celestia and Nightmare Moon of Megagross years before. The untamed weather of Everfree had worn the stone down, leaving the once majestic Alicorn statues flanking the large wooden gates eroded and impotent. Vines and moss and other forms of creeping plant life had invaded the walls. There was just one other detail about the castle that could be seen now that the six were closer to its base. "Is that a tree?" asked Applejack. It looked that way. It seemed as though the ancient palace was built upon the branches of a very large and very wide tree whose roots disappeared into the fog. The way that the dim moonlight reflected off its bark, though, told them something else.
"Is it petrified?"
mused Twilight.
"Or made from stone?"
Fluttershy wondered.
"No,"
cut in Rarity.
"black diamond."
Rarity was correct. The tree, roots to branches, seemed to be formed out of a single place of multifaceted black diamond. 5 great branches supported the ancillary wings that splintered off from the central hub of the palace.
"It really is lovely,"
said Rarity, more to herself than any pony else.
"It seems such a shame that this place should have fallen to such ruin. If I could, I would see this palace restored to its former glory."
"That's pretty sweet and all, Rare," said Rainbow Dash, "but we got some elements to swipe." "Yes, we do," Twilight said simply, galloping straight up to the bridge, her 5 companions trying to keep peace. This everlasting night had simply gone on long enough. The main gate proved to be surprisingly simple to open, seeing as whoever had last left the palace had not taken care to lock it down, or even completely close it. Each taking a deep breath, they crossed the threshold. The main hall of the palace was easily large enough to contain the gazebo and golden oak library, and still have plenty of space to the front, the back, and sides. If Twilight figured the dimensions properly, it was probably even larger than Queen Celestia's throne room up in Canterlot. Pillars as thick as redwoods were engraved with images of great pony warriors whose names escaped even Twilight's mind. The carpet beneath them, and the tapestries depicting the sun and moon at the far end of the main hall, were faded with age and weathering, and the ceiling was caved in many places. Debris littered the floor, abandoned weapons, the odd helmet of 2 or by a bygone armor design, and chunks of roof rock made crossing the main hall slightly less straightforward. Branching off from the main hall were many corridors, flanked by empty sconces that once held the bright burning torches and candles. Circling the shattered remains of a long derelict chandelier brought by the 6 halfway through the main hall. Now they had a more proper look at the other end. There was a large dais, easily higher than one pony standing on another's withers, with a pair of circling staircases leading up to it. Up there, directly before each staircase, seemingly untouched by time, were a pair of thrones, side by side. The one on the right, beneath the sun-based tapestry, was bright yellow, surrounded by all manner of engravings and heraldry depicting the sun and the activities of the day. On their left, beneath the moon-based tapestry, was a deep blue throne, identical save for color, surrounded by engravings which depicted stars, constellations, and the moon in varying phases. Between the circling staircases was a fountain overgrown with weeds and moss. It bore on it several large stones, each set with an unclear mark, and looking on them seemed to fill Twilight with a peace of mind, as though her soul had been supplied with some spiritual balm.
"There they are! The elements!"
Twilight cried with joy, rearing up. Collecting the elements would have seemed to be a hassle. Each orb, perfectly smooth and polished, as though they had just been placed yesterday, was about as wide around as the gap under Twilight's legs, while standing fully erect on all fours. But when Rainbow Dash and Fluttershy flew up to grab one together, it lifted with surprising easiness. After they placed it on the ground, Rainbow then experimented with a single element, tapping it with a hoof. It almost slid off, but Rainbow quickly bolted and snagged it. Within a minute, All 6 of the elements were collected and at their hooves.
There's only 5!
Piggy said, sounding a little fearful. A lump appeared Twilight's throat.
One of the elements was missing? Do you think that the 6th element might have been stolen?
Verity pondered.
Or perhaps spirited away by Nightmare Moon? Or maybe it's hidden somewhere?
Fireside asked hopefully. Hidden. A lightning bolt shot through Twilight's mind as she beamed. I've got it!
Got what? The 6th element?
Pinky asked, an eyebrow quirked up.
No, I just remembered.
Twilight used her magic to produce Philomena's letter from Queen Celestia.
See all these randomly bolted letters? And the bolted word spark?
The other 5 nodded.
I just realized. They're not random at all! The Queen always uses a fresh quill whenever she writes, so that her message is as plain as day for any pony she sends it to. She had to have bolted these letters deliberately. Now,
she squinted down at the letter.
If I read this carefully, I should be able to decode her message.
Her tongue curving up her upper lip, Twilight looked carefully down at the letter, looking carefully for a bolted letter.
Let's see. The S and should be is bolded. I X T H. Okay. So the first paragraph's words is 6. So the second paragraph's secret word should be, as I thought, element. 6th element, spark,
pondered Rarity.
It doesn't seem to be much to go on, darling.
The Queen had to have written this, knowing that Nightmare Moon was just minutes away, Twilight said. She can't have had time to give much, but I know how to produce the 6th element of harmony.
Heil!
All 5 asked at once.
Twilight smirked. If I understand this coded message correctly, then the 6th element should appear when a spark ignites the other 5.
She explained, trotting into a circle of the 5 inert elements formed. Her alicorn lit, her glimmer shimmer casting an unusual amount of light off the other elements.
You girls might want to stay back, she said cautiously. I'm not sure what will happen.
Applejack nodded to the others. Come on, y'all. She needs to concentrate. With varying degrees of reluctance, they retreated into the fallen chandelier. Once she was sure they were safely away, Twilight set to work. Closing her eyes, she lit up her horn again, casting her mind around the spell that could create a spark.
But what sort of spell would regenerate a spark that could ignite harmony? She thought. Think, Twilight. Think! This isn't for them. This is for your parents. This is for Spike. This is for everybody you care about. This is for the Queen.
Meanwhile, the 5 Ponyville natives were convening amongst each other.
I really don't think we should have left her alone,
Rainbow Dash said bluntly.
I smell something funny about this.
We're close enough that we'll notice if anything funny happens, replied Applejack, digging in a hoof. You think I'd let something bad happen to one of my best friends?
Oh no, Rainbow Dash didn't mean anything like that,
Fireside said,
raising her head slightly so that her mane covered her eyes slightly less. What else could she have possibly meant? Verity said. And besides, we do need to give Twilight her space. Why, it's just like me when a client takes out a big order of Carousel Couture's Carousel style wares. Hold it!
Piggy shouted in a frightened voice. Looking at her, her fellow pony villagers saw that she was holding her left elbow.
My knee's super pinchy.
Immediately, the 5 turned to face Twilight. A starry blue mist had gathered around her, and the elements, and the lavender unicorn, who had not noticed her peril.
Twilight!
The 5 shouted, breaking into a gallop. Twilight snapped her head up, horn glowing dark in an instant. She cried out in shock as she saw the swirling mist and floating elements, and heard the diabolical laugh. Ha 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 ha! The mist tore off down one of the side hallways, having given Twilight in the elements. After her! Applejack shouted, the 5 ponies galloping in hot pursuit. Their foe was fast, but she left a long, smoky trail.
This was the opposite
of the feeling of waking out. Whereas waking out felt like every particle of your body being compressed into a singularity, this felt more like your body was being broken down and spread across the universe. It was peculiar, but not an altogether unpleasant means of waking out. The experience was short-lived, as Twilight felt her body reconstituting and her hose making rough contact with hard stone. Collapsing onto her belly, she blinked the blurriness away and looked up. She was in some dilapidated meeting hall, a large stone dais at the end of the long room. Behind it were 3 broken, stained glass windows. And on the dais stood Nightmare Moon, the element's harmony held in her starry blue mane. She wore an expression of savage pleasure, her bat-like fangs glinting in her razor-sharp grin. Lightning flashed outside the windows. Twilight struggled through her hose, a plan coming to mind. A risky one, a crazy one. But if it worked? She glared at the Queen of Darkness, pawing at the ground as she lowered her head for a charge. Nightmare Moon narrowed her slitted eyes at Twilight. "Surely you jest at me?" she snarled, snake-like tongue flicking out of her mouth. Nevertheless, she accepted Twilight's invitation to duel with her own pawing at the ground. She placed the elements on the dais around her as she lowered her head, her own alicorn far longer than Twilight's own. She had the clear edge. The combatants charged, the hall echoing loudly with their footsteps. Twilight grinned internally as she saw Nightmare Moon's alicorn lighting up with that bright cyan glimmer-shimmer. Purple lightning arcing up and down the dark alicorn's horn, her own horn already ablaze with bright pink light. But she was not preparing an offensive spell. The instant before Nightmare Moon's horn would have impaled Twilight Sparkle's skull, she vanished in a bright flash of pink light. Nightmare Moon slid to a stop, momentarily perplexed by the lack of a corpse impaled on her horn. On the dais, Twilight appeared amidst the elements, her head bobbing back and forth. Going from practically inconsequent particles to solid, to a singularity to solid again, was not an experience that left Twilight in an altogether collected state. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, Twilight desperately set about trying to ignite a spark. "Come on," she thought, as her horn crackled with pink lightning. "Just one spark! Just one little spark! Nuriain Fuke, please!" Behind her, Nightmare Moon had noticed what Twilight had done, whirled into the air as a twister of starry blue mist, and descended upon the dais, the impact sending Twilight to the floor again, hitting her head with a cracking crack. Blinking spots out of her eyes, Twilight made note of her condition. She was probably concussed, but she would have to worry about medical attention later, and stay conscious to see Nightmare Moon through to the end. She rolled onto her belly, facing the dais. The elements were crackling back and forth, white lightning dancing between them. Nightmare Moon's eyes were wide with fear, drawing her forehead back. Twilight smirked in victory. Then the elements of harmony fell silent and dim. Nightmare Moon raised a deep blue eyebrow at them, then grinned her devil's grin at Twilight. "But," Twilight reached pleadingly towards the elements, "the 6th element." Nightmare Moon let out a wicked cackle, rearing up and crushing 2 of the elements under her forehoofs, the stone shards flying toward Twilight. Then she crushed the 2 others under her hind hooves. Then she drove her alicorn down into the 5th, the element splitting into a dozen pieces. "You little fool!" snarled Nightmare Moon. "Thinking you could defeat me? Me, the Mistress of Darkness!" Tears streamed down Twilight's muzzle. Without the elements, all hope was surely lost. "You have amused me, though, with your insignificant little rebellion," the Alicorn said, idly trotting toward the fallen Twilight. "I won't kill you, though. You will serve as a fine example of those who defy me, and I would not waste my mana upon the likes of Celestia's lapdog." Nightmare Moon was now directly over Twilight, as he kneeled down so she could meet Twilight eye to eye. Nightmare Moon's snake tongue flicked across her fangs and wolf's teeth, and Twilight shivered.
She had to stay awake. She had to. She didn't want to die in her sleep.
Nightmare Moon gave a feral smile to Twilight.
Instead, I will give you one last look at your queen and your son.
Behold! Nightmare Moon's swimmer shimmer lit up, projecting a large cyan circle in the air. The hollow middle pointed and turned to a bright golden fire, and Twilight knew that this was the closest she had ever seen of the sun. In that form, the silhouette in a fetal position, with a horn and wings, was that. But the end image dissipated, and Twilight blacked out. The last thing she heard was Nightmare Moon's declaration of, "The sun shall not shine upon Equestria ever again!" Followed by a mad cackle. The last thing she felt was a brush of wind as Nightmare Moon took flight and departed for her new throne and what was once Canterlot.